Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has claimed his party was now the opposition to Labour after a YouGov survey put Mr Farage's party at 19% and the Conservatives trailing on 18% in voting intention in a dramatic crossover moment and the latest blow to Tory hopes of returning to government. So why don't we hear what Nigel Farage had to say a little earlier on today?
And I'm putting it to you that I believe I can be that voice of opposition. I'm pretty clear and consistent in what I stand up for. I'm not afraid of a fight. I don't bow to Twitter pressure or the mob on the streets. I've taken on the European Union, I've taken on the big banks, and I'm pretty certain I can take on a Labour government headed by Keir Starmer that will have almost no honeymoon period whatsoever, will inherit some very, very deep problems, and I don't think has the radical solutions to sort the country out.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage also challenged Sir Keir Starmer to a TV debate on immigration.
I would also very much like to do a debate head-to-head with Keir Starmer. And the reason is very simple. We think that this should be the immigration election, because whether we're talking about rents, whether we're talking about housing availability, whether we're talking about access to GP services, whether we're talking about pressure on infrastructure, there is no aspect of our national life that is not touched by the massive population crisis this country now faces, directly as a result of immigration policies that were started by Labour but accelerated by this Conservative government.
Well, there's a whole heap there to analyse, and let's do that in the studio with GBNews' political editor Chris Hope and also the political correspondent at The Spectator, James Hill. Welcome to the show, gents. Chris, let's start with you. You were at this press conference earlier on today. In fact, you got the first question in. It was feisty, it was forthright, it was fighting talk. Tell us, what was the atmosphere like in the room?
Well, there's a feeling of momentum around Farage. Personally, he's added some tiger in the tank, I think, of the Reform UK party. He wasn't there 2 weeks ago when he wasn't a candidate. Now he's the leader and wants to be, he's saying he's the leader of the opposition. All sorts of questions there. He says he wants to get 6 million votes when I asked him. I said to him, well, if you get that many and end up with 3 or 4 MPs and the Tories have fewer than that votes but many more MPs, what do you do then? And that's the question I think he's facing. What does he do, a kind of Trump and denounce the result of the election and look like he's anti-democratic? Or does he say, right, let's channel this anger and push for proportional representation in 2029, the next election but one? We are at the beginning, I think, of a 6-year programme of taking over the right wing in politics in this country. He's looking at 2029, not so much this immediate election on July the 4th. Now, he performed well at the TV debates thus far. He talks about Ofcom basing its analysis, your suitability to take part in events on your performance at 2 previous electoral cycles. Of course, Reform hasn't taken part in them, so he feels that the BBC are keeping Reform out of the show unfairly. Do you think he's got a case for that? And do you think, actually, Rishi Sunak should take him on? He's got previous, I think, in challenging the status quo. He's done that with the polling council. He's forced the polling council to get pollsters to strip out Reform UK and ask them as a distinct party rather than others when they do polling. And that will help Reform UK with its distinct identity with voters and also to get a better feeling for how many people support him. But yeah, I think his next target is forcing these broadcasters, and we're run or controlled, regulated by Ofcom, like the big 3 broadcasters are, saying, why can't I now debate directly with Keir Starmer? I'm leading, according to one poll, the second party. And if I was Sunak, I'd be tempted. If you look at those numbers last night from YouGov, if you add the number for Reform to the Tories, you get the same number, 35%, as vote Labour. If Sunak debated with Farage behind closed doors, away from an audience who would be helpful to Farage, not to Sunak, and Sunak won, like he beat Liz Truss in those debates in 2022, it might put a real rocket boosters under the Tory polling. It's a massive risk, but frankly, I think the Tories need to do do something now.
OK, James Cheel, let's turn to you on that point. I mean, so far, Rishi's been pretty dismissive. It's with a flick of the wrist. No, I'm not really interested in talking about reform. It's between myself and Sir Keir Starmer. But nothing's happening. The polls are flatlining. The manifesto hasn't seen an uptick, had a disastrous D-Day. Could this be something that he should take on?
I think that there's real calls right now for Sunak to do something in terms of trying to be a game changer in this. You've got 3 weeks left of it, and I think that at least something like that would make him seem sort of brave in taking the fight to Farage. This is the key point right now, which is that if this is only the poll, we've only one poll, which is the YouGov, showing that Reform's ahead of the Tories. But if there's others, there's a second and a third, then they'll add to this pressure, and it'll change the whole dynamics of the contest. The Tory High Command want to frame this as a two-horse race between Sunak and Starmer. But of course, if Farage is doing better on that than Sunak, then there's obviously clear pressure to change all that. I agree with what Chris was saying there. I think we forget sometimes that because he's had a few bad years, Sunak wasn't seen as a great debater, but he is. In 2019, he was the person who Boris Johnson sent out and represent him in the debates for the Conservatives. He took on Liz Truss and won in 2022. Why not have someone who's actually been in government who could say, look, Nigel, you're a great campaigner, but actually you're not going to make the people's lives better?
At what point do you think the men in grey suits start stepping in, the grandees in the party, and say to Sunak, nothing is working in these polls. You've now got all of your policies out there. They are written in tablets of stone in your manifesto. You've got to do something else, something risky. And I think that'll be next week.
I'm just not sure there are any men in grey suits left. I think, unfortunately, there are very few people who are respected across the party. I'm sure in private, some grandees will be giving him advice. And I've seen Danny Finkelstein today, for instance, that there should be a debate where he takes on Farage. But I think really, we're down to the wire now. We've got 3 weeks to go. I'm not sure how much is going to change, given how little the public seems to be listening to him. Well,
could it be the kind of flash moment that is required? Because at the moment, nothing seems to be working for Rishi Sunak. In fact, he seems to be on that downward trajectory. Could that dramatic debate with Nigel Farage be what the nation needs to decide finally between the two? Now let's move on, because Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds was asked earlier today about Reform UK's polling rise and whether he was concerned whether it could take votes from the Labour Party.
Well, I think if you look at what we've seen in some of the big by-elections, for instance, running into this general election, you've seen Labour genuinely win support from a whole range of different quarters, whether that's Conservatives switching to us, whether it's people who were Labour but then felt they couldn't support us and they've come back to us. So look, there's always a lot going on in British politics, but the job for us is, can we convince people, can we ask them to put their trust and support in us, to have a mandate for change, to form the next government? And I feel very confident in the arguments we're putting forward on that.
Is that a point? I mean, don't forget, during the Brexit Party election 2019, one I took part in, the Red Wall, loads and loads of Labour votes flopped into the Brexit Party. Yeah. It's not just a situation where a Conservative is flipping into Reform. This is every vote up for grab.
I remember meeting you on the bus in Dudley when they were flocking around there cheering for Farage, and you were there but part of the Farage team, and it was striking, I think, and I was the only journalist with him all that period covering it for the Telegraph at the time. But I think, definitely, I think there's a feeling, I think, and he was saying, wasn't he, Nigel Farage, their polling showing in the Red Wall they are the party of opposition to Labour. So he's always said he thinks he can hoover up some of those votes. That Jonathan can say that. I'm just not entirely sure it's right, Jonathan Reynolds says.
James, do you think this interesting flip of the conversation that Nigel Farage threw out there last night, he's judo thrown the line back of a vote for Reform is a vote for Sir Keir Starmer. He's now saying a vote for the Conservatives is a vote for Sir Keir Starmer.
Absolutely, yes, he's got every right to. And, look, I think his talks about being the real leader of the opposition are a slight, perhaps, a bit of chutzpah, a bit of it audacious, perhaps. But look, this is the key point, isn't it? Which is that if all you can do is tell your voters, don't vote for us, we're better than the other guy, the other guy's worse than us, which is effectively what a lot of the Tory messaging has boiled down to, and you don't have a track record to stand on, don't be surprised if suddenly you get overtaken in the polls and that argument gets flipped on its head. And I suppose the key thing is, what do the 2019 Tory voters, the voting coalition, have to go to the polls on? And the answer is not as much as they wanted.
I was struck by Richard Tice saying in that press conference, they are now keeping a tally of how many leaflets they're seeing by Tory candidates without the word Conservative on them, because they're just trying to say language which may appeal to the Reform. The Tory brand is almost, in some places, as Farage said, a broken brand.
Can I just add a quick point as well? I watched Laura Trott earlier on responding to the Labour manifesto. It was, there are 18 Labour tax rises, 58 billion higher, they're only planning to put taxes up, it'll be a fiasco, it'll be disastrous. It feels like Project Fear.
Well, it was. Well, I was
again.
there. I was there, and I asked a question. You know, is the football's on this weekend? You're 4-0 down, and the crowd are booing you. What do? You sign up the striker from the other team. That's Nigel Farage. She said no. So that one dealt with very quickly. But the point is about they are trying to say, look what we're not hearing in the manifesto launched by Labour yesterday. There's all sorts of other areas, mainly on wealth taxes, capital gains tax, and pensioners and other things, which may see some raiding on them in the future. And they point to 1997. When Gordon Brown did his famous pensions raid in 97, when that was not talked about in the Labour manifesto then. So they say this has been happened before, it can happen again. Don't trust Labour is what they say.
But don't you think, James, that it's starting to feel so negative? I mean, people respond to positivity. Things are going to get better. You know, get Brexit done. Positive electoral messages. The Conservative Party just seems to be responding to the Labour Party with negative messaging. The country's about to get a lot worse. Is that enough at this stage?
I don't think so. And I think you look at the track record as one of the two big issues. On immigration, they're being attacked from the right by Nigel Farage, and on the left, it's about taxation, which is that even under the Conservative spending plans, the tax burden will go up over the next course of the next Parliament. So this isn't a kind of low-tax Conservative Party. I think what's striking is that if you look actually at the messaging that they're putting out on Facebook and social media, 4 out of 5 Tory attack ads are all about attacking Labour and being very negative with Keir Starmer. There isn't the kind of positive message we thought we might have around Rishi Sunak. And really, right now, it's a pretty bleak, apathetic election right now. I think we're going to see a low turnout, and I think we're going to see a lot more negativity in the coming 3 weeks.
Well, I've been at all of the manifesto launches this week, apart from the Green Party, Lib Dems, Tories and Labour, and you did feel optimism at Labour's one, and it didn't feel optimistic at all at Silverstone. They made the attempt, they did a vague feeling of sunny uplands. That wasn't there in Silverstone.
And now all eyes, of course, on Monday, and that's the Reform Party pledge, manifesto, contract launch, whatever it's going to be.
And it won't be in England. It won't be in England.
But you're going to be there.
I may have a different job on Monday. I can't say what it is.
Sounds exciting. Thank you very much, James, Cheel, Chris Hope for kicking off the show. Excellent stuff.